At the time of this video's recording, it has been exactly almost 1 year since the start of my Curse of Strahd campaign. My players are scattered all across the globe and in several different time zones, but they usually manage to get together over Roll20 every 2 weeks or so for sessions that run around 3 to 4 hours in length. I think this is pretty typical for most groups. My party is composed of 6 players in total, 4 of which are returning players that have played at my table before. The other 2 are newcomers to the hobby, and I am always very pleased to have new players at my table. It's almost like being able to be a carnival master or a curator in a house of antiquities. I get to show them a whole new world where we build a story together out of raw myth and legends. The rulebook serving as our pillars of order and the dice serving as the agents of chaos and possibility. With the final session of our campaign fast approaching, I wanted to make a few videos discussing the lore and characters of this campaign setting that I've come to appreciate and enjoy so much. I've waited years to see a campaign like this come to fruition, and my players, we wouldn't be here without you, and thank you for bearing with me through the rule disputes and the scheduling issues, but mostly, thank you for being such good sports to me and to each other. Smiley face. So the Ravenloft setting we know today actually began as a standalone adventure called Module I6 Ravenloft. It was released by TSR and published in 1983. The module had been written by Tracy and Laura Hickman, and they had written it as a classic gothic horror story. The couple had supposedly been disappointed with the lack of depth in the story in D&D at the time. It was very much more focused around being a looting and combat simulator. It was really all about the dungeons back then. It didn't have much to do with role playing as we would do it today. But they aimed to take a classic enemy type from this game, the vampire, and give him gravitas and personality and backstory and a true motivation for why he was in the game and doing the things he was doing. And they succeeded in creating a real monster, a cautionary tale, as they called it, of a selfish beast who uses guile and romanticism to camouflage his evil nature. And thus, Count Strahd von Zarovich was born. So before the couple were hired by TSR to adapt the module to AD&D, the Hickmans had playtested this module with friends every Halloween for 5 years. And they had used their own game system, and it had been under their own title called Vampire or Vampire. But every year their friends would refer to the module as that Ravenloft game, and the name apparently stuck. So Strahd and Ravenloft are possibly both my favorite villain and setting across all my campaigns. I have played, and I plan on doing a video specifically on him in the future because he deserves it. But for now, we're going to go into a little bit about the original I6 Ravenloft and the setting origins, because it's actually very interesting. To understand the story today, we have to understand where it comes from. So the original module is actually very elegant in its simplicity. So Borovia is described as a valley. It's campaign agnostic, so it was designed so that you could kind of plop it down anywhere you wanted to for your players to adventure in, maybe between adventures, between campaign settings, whatever you wanted. And to enter Borovia, one just had to enter one of the 2 gates. One was to the east of the actual village of Borovia, and the other one was to the west of the castle crossroads up the actual mountain. And when your PCs arrive at the gates, of course, the gates will swing open, granting them entrance. But once the characters actually pass the threshold, so to say, they will shut behind them, and the PCs cannot leave again until Strahd is destroyed. And nor would they want to leave right away, because the fog, or the wall of mist that exists in Borovia at the time in this module, it is not quite the ethereal barrier that it is in the present module. The mist is kind of what defines almost the domains and realms of dread, because they all have this barrier of mist, right, that separates them from all the other domains. That doesn't exist yet, and the concept of domains of dread don't exist yet, but the wall of mist is very much still there, but it more like suffuses everything in Borovia. The mist and fog are everywhere. And the main thing about, the clever thing I would like to say about this is that the mist is actually a poison in the I6 module. So when a living creature spends some time breathing this in, it infuses itself around a character's vital organs as a neutralized poison. And The fog does not taste or smell any different than regular fog. It can't be discerned to be this magical poison, basically, until it's too late. It does not harm characters as long as they continue to breathe the air in Borovia, but once they leave, the poison becomes active, and the character ends up making poison saves, or they start to choke. And unless the choking characters re-enter Borovia within 24 hours, they just die, flat out. And the choking will stop as soon as they breathe the fog again. So this is a rather large difference. A poisonous fog that kind of ensures your servitude or your bondage to this place, right? You're like a hostage now because you breathe the air, versus a mystical wall of mist that can kind of turn you about and sap the life force from you or spit you out somewhere else in another domain. It's very different. Once the players have entered the valley, the main attraction, of course, is Castle Ravenloft. So it can be seen anywhere within the realm. Doesn't matter if they enter from the east or west gates. It is imposing, and it is a constant reminder of Strahd's power and dominance in his realm. The surrounding forest is still called the Svalich or Svalich Woods, and it is patrolled by beasts and wolves that are loyal to the vampire. And this has not changed from the modern module. It's a very much spooky Transylvanian forest full of wolves that will devour you if you stray off the road. Now, the village of Borovia itself is remarkably unchanged from back in 1983 to when this was released till the present day. And that's just a testament to how well written it was as an adventure. There have only been some minor additions, which we'll go through if you're interested in that kind of stuff. But I just find it remarkable that after all this time, this module has, in fact, the core of it, the village, the castle, and the Serpul encampment have changed so very little in all these years. Points of interest and orders, of course, Bildrath's Mercantile. It still exists as it does almost a one-to-one in the modern campaign to the original. So Bildrath is a merchant who will unashamedly attempt to take advantage of the players by charging them 10 times the normal price of any item found in the AD&D shopping list. If the PCs give him any trouble, if they start to threaten him, or just use force to try and get what they want, then Parawimple, who is the stock boy, he is a simple-minded nephew to Bildrath, but he's a huge, hulking, powerful man, and will come over and straighten the PCs out. Bildrath trades with the gypsies, or the Vistani, when they pass through, and he's not above making a profit from anyone who is unlucky enough to find themselves here, so he serves himself. He offers no sanctuary. He never bargains a price, since he believes the famous quote, "If you want it badly enough, you'll pay for it, because you certainly won't be taking your business elsewhere." We're meant to assume that Bildrath is native to Borovia, so probably a Borovian, and not a Vistani. He's altogether an unpleasant character. Next is the Blood on the Vine Tavern, or the Blood of the Vine Tavern. So Arik is still the Borovian barkeep, and he is still the oddly wooden, emotionless, soulless man who just polishes drinks. He polishes these drink glasses all day. When he's done with the last one, he starts over again and goes back to the first one. He's still here as the barkeep, along with 3 gypsies. Now, in the original module, they're just referred to as 3 generic gypsies. They're not given names or gender. In the modern module, you have Sorvia, Alenka, and Mirabelle, ostensibly sisters, maybe. It's never really fleshed out, but I usually use them as sisters. And all 3 of them are Vistani, and their only purpose here, apparently, is just to make sure that everyone settles their tab. And while the gypsies are the owners of the tavern, they are very disinterested in the PCs, and you can chalk this up to them pretty much understanding that these outsiders are not long for the world if they're here, that Strahd probably has plans for them, because of course in this module the gypsies are unabashedly servants of Strahd. Ismark the Lesser can still be found here, and he is the Burgomaster's son. He is a 1-to-1 carbon copy. Ismark has changed not a whit. He is still the same Borovian that is tight-lipped as any other of the villagers, and he's only really willing to open up about his sister, and that's more from his desperation for her plight more than anything else. So the campaign hook that leads the players here in the modern module is titled A Plea for Help. It involves a Vistani man traveling to an inn where the players are staying at, presumably between adventures, and presenting a letter to them from the burgomaster of Borovia, a Kolian Indirovich. Now, this Kolian Indirovich is supposedly supposed to entreat the players for their aid. His daughter is under attack, has suffered some kind of wound, oh, won't you please come and help her? After that, the Vistani disappears without any further explanation, and the players are meant to find Borovia, find the inn, find Ismark, and then Ismark can let them know that that letter that they're carrying is a fake. He is the burgomaster's son, and that is not his father's handwriting, and this is when they should start to feel particularly nervous. Ismark will lead them to the burgomaster's mansion if the players have no objections. But before we get there, one of my personal favorites is Mad Mary's townhouse. So this is normally when your players are either in transition to or from any part of a building or any point of interest inside the village. They can hear that moaning sob floating through the still gray streets, and it's meant for them to go and investigate this townhouse. So the house is about 40 feet square, it's boarded up, barricaded from the inside. It's still the same as in the modern module, and they can find the NPC Mad Mary, who is kind of sitting in the middle of the floor of an upstairs bedroom, and she's lost in her sorrow and despondency. And she can barely recognize anybody in the room. Like, she won't acknowledge their presence unless they kind of force her to. So if she can be shaken kind of out of her comatose state, she'll say that her beloved daughter Gertruda, who's basically she's hidden away in her house her entire life, has broken out of the house and she's not here anymore, and her mother fears the worst. The only real difference between the modern module and the original I6 module is that Mad Mary has one of the Ablinski dolls in their modern module. What is a Ablinski doll, you might ask? Ablinski dolls are these macabre contraptions and toys created by one Gadolf Ablinski. He's kind of interesting and enigmatic to me, and he's always felt like he had a lot more potential than just to be some foppish toy maker. And we'll get to him when we cover Vallaki, I think. But yeah, that's the main difference, is that she doesn't have a Ablinski doll with her, but she is kind of sitting out of it in the middle of her bedroom in the boarded-up house. When Ismark leads the players to the mansion is still the same kind of wary-looking building that squats behind this rusted-out iron fence. The iron gates have been torn and twisted, almost by like a great press of bodies, or maybe someone that is enormously strong was able to do that to them. There are weeds choking the grounds, presumably because no one can be bothered to go out there and keep the surrounding garden. Against the walls, there are basically signs of assault, like heavy claw markings have stripped the finish from the walls of the outside. There are these great black blottings where fires had been set by someone or something against the walls, and there isn't any glass in any of the windows. They've all been shattered, and the windows are all boarded up with heavy planking. When the PCs enter, of course, Irina will let them in, as long as Ismark is with them. So Irina is described as a sweet but troubled woman, and she has a strong will and a good arm, and she's not meant to be this damsel in distress that's incapable of aiding the party at all. She will fight to protect herself, and she will fight to save members of the party if she has to. She's not a pushover. She won't swoon at the first sight of a fight. In a side drawing room of the mansion, in the darkness, the burgomaster is lying dead in state in this makeshift coffin that they've built for him. Everything is as it is in the modern module. By the time the players arrive, the burgomaster has been dead for nearly 10 days, and the smell is terrible inside of the mansion. And Ismark will explain that the burgomaster died as a result of the near constant assaults that had been taking place, but his heart just couldn't take it anymore, and he expired in the night. But strangely, since he's died, that the assaults have not continued, and it makes one think that maybe that was the intent. So this is really where the almonds start to get activated, right? So the players realize that they've been asked to come to this foreign land, and they've tried to contact the burgomaster, who supposedly had sent them this letter, but they find out it's all a con, basically. So the letter isn't from this guy, and this guy is dead, and now we have this woman who apparently is being assaulted by this vampire, this creature that's been terrorizing this land for almost 400 years for some reason, has this fixation on her, and she can't explain it. There is one difference from the original module, I guess, is the guest house. So in the original module, the Burgomaster's Mansion has a guest house. It's roughly a 50-foot square. And it's not fortified or anything like the rest of the buildings in the town are, so it's probably not a very good place for your players to settle down for the night. But that is the only difference that I've been able to see. Now, the last point of interest in the town really is the church, which is kind of on the outskirts of the town, rather. And the church, ostensibly, is the last kind of bastion of light and goodness in this place, right? So, Father Donovic is a Borovian priest. He's a native to the land, and he can be heard praying and chanting throughout the night, every night. And his voice is hoarse and weak, and apparently he's successfully been able to protect the church from Strahd and his minions. One of the larger differences also is that Doru does not exist yet. Doru is the vampire spawn, who was originally Father Donovic's son. And the story goes is that about a year before the PCs show up, a wizard, some of you might know who this wizard is, but a very mysterious and powerful wizard of some renown, shows up in Borovia, attempting to overthrow Strahd von Zarovich, and he rallies a bunch of the peasants against Strahd and leads them to Ravenloft, the castle, to try and throw the vampire down, and of course that fails. So the peasants are killed or driven off or turned, and Doru is one of the ones that were turned into this creature, this vampire spawn. He's sent to the church to basically torment Father Donovich, so that he can see what has happened to his son in an attempt to break him. So yeah, that whole arc, Donovich in the original module is alone. He doesn't have a son. He's just responsible for protecting the church with his prayers, and he's largely successful. In the modern module, he's praying and he's praying and he's praying, but his prayers don't seem to be very useful because the church is under assault by creatures from Strahd every night almost, and Doru is locked up in the undercroft of the church, howling at all hours, like kind of breaking the priest's sanity. You know, Father, I'm hungry! You know, stuff like that. Now, Father Donovic in the original module can offer the players some information and possibly some safety if they stick inside of the church. So the information he knows is that there's a book in the library of Ravenloft that might be able to help them destroy the Devil Strahd, because apparently it's well known from ancient times that Strahd kept meticulous notes on all that he did or said. So maybe some weakness could be found there. His other bit of information he knows is about Irina, is that she's not the natural-born daughter of Kolian and Dirovich. She's actually was found one day wandering about near the edge of the Sphalic Woods, near the Pillarstone of Ravenloft when she was a girl, and she has no knowledge of her past, but Kolian adopted her, and she's pretty much been loved dearly by him ever since then. The attachment to the church is, of course, the cemetery. And this is where you get the creepy bit where at night, every midnight, there is a ghostly procession that takes place. There are 100 spirits that rise from the graveyard, and they march up the road they basically have a procession to Castle Ravenloft. They have no interest in anybody. The living can't hurt them or touch them or interact with them in any way. And these are meant to be the adventurers, the spirits of the adventurers that have all died trying to destroy Strahd. And it's meant to be like a oh crap moment for your players when they see it, if they ever see it. My players certainly never saw it because my players refuse to go out at night. they're that scared. So the last place of note is the Serpol encampment. So this is where the gypsies make their camp while they're in Borovia. There's 10 of them standing in a clearing, singing, drinking, cavorting, and whatnot. And when the players arrive, it's much the same as in the original module. They say, oh, it was fated that you'd be here. Please come and see Madame Eva. And, she'll offer to read them their fortunes. Now, in the modern module, Madame Eva's place on the enemy meter, if she's a good or baddie, is a little bit more ambiguous. In the original module, she is a servant of Strahd. She serves Strahd because it benefits her people, and she probably just doesn't want to get eaten, right? It's a good deal to have. It's well known that in the older Lord, the Vistani made purchases for Strahd. They probably did his dry cleaning, They would lure people to his realm. They're his secret service. They did things for him on the down low. If the Vistani interacted with or knew or found the players somewhere, Strahd would know it because they would sell them out. They couldn't be trusted. So Madame Eva herself is the leader of this particular troop of Vistani, and in the old lore, she has no relation to Strahd at all. I know in some of the newer lore, I've read that she apparently is an illegitimate child of the King Barov, Strahd's father, and thus, related to Strahd's basically his sister, or half-sister. In the original lore, that's not the case. She has no blood relation to Strahd von Zarovich. She's a Vistani because, that would make her an outcast, I think, from the Vistani society. But her main role in all of this is, of course, to offer the fortune-telling. So it wasn't called the Taroka deck yet. It's basically just called the Fortunes of Ravenloft. So it's supposed to simulate, a gypsy fortune-telling little card reading. And, you can tell the satanic panic was well and truly in effect back then, because it even says in the module, it says, this should not be taken as a real fortune-telling reading of some kind. This is clearly just a part of the game to simulate one, It's funny reading that kind of stuff nowadays. And, she's a loon. She acts crazy and mad to the PCs, but she's actually pretty sharp. And she can't be fooled by the adventurers as much as they try. One other thing of note is that Strahd has actually gifted her a potion that will render her and her people basically immune to the effects of the fog. This is ostensibly the reason why they can be basically unharmed by the fog when other people end up being choked by it. Now, this is the very first iteration of this relationship with Strahd, so of course it's different. Nowadays it's not like that. But the Vistani kind of have this power as a people. It's like natural to them that they can traverse the fog in the mist of Ravenloft and the Domains of Dread. But remember, the Domains of Dread don't exist yet. We're still in the olden times, where there are no Domains of Dread. Borovia is just some place on the prime material plane wherever the Dungeon Master needs it to be. But she will offer them the reading. If they don't wish to have their fortunes read or whatnot, sometimes they want to skip it, that's fine, because the module will tell you that even before the game starts, you're going to have already done the reading. They encourage that in the modern module too, to kind of trick your players if you want to make your reading not as random as it's supposed to be, because sometimes random readings can make the game kind of strange. But same thing applies here. So you do a reading before the game starts, and if your players don't want a reading, then you would use those results. But if they do want a new reading, then you would just throw the old results out. Simple as. So the original reading, what we call Taroka today, was called the Fortunes of Ravenloft. And how it worked was pretty simple. You could use a regular 52 card playing deck of cards. You remove all of the 2s, the 4s, the 6s, the 8s, the 9s, and the Joker cards. So now you would have 4 suits with 8 cards in each suit. And you shuffle the deck. If you don't have cards, you could use a D8 to determine the type of card, and a D4 to determine the suit. So what you would be determining, of course, is where certain treasures were, exactly like today, but the most interesting thing was that you would also be determining what Strahd's goal was for the game. That, to me, I was amazed, because he won't have the same goal from game to game if you use that system, right? In one game, he'll be trying to create a magical sphere of darkness. And naturally, we don't want Strahd having a magical sphere of darkness. That sounds like bad news. In another one, Strahd wants the Sun Sword. But my favorite one is that Strahd seeks a new identity. So on a result of 3 or 5, his goal in the campaign is that Strahd is seeking to basically establish a new identity for himself. And how he accomplishes this is AD&D genius. So he will attempt to charm a PC and then find some way to get him and that PC alone, where no one else can see them. And then he will use the spell Polymorph back then, because it could do things like this, to transform that player into a vampire. Has all the stats, he radiates the heebie-jeebie aura of being a vampire. He's a vampire. Once he's transformed this PC into a vampire, he hides him in his own coffin and passes him off as Strahd. And then he will transform himself using Polymorph into the PC's likeness. And then he'll join back up with the party and be like, hey guys, I found a way out of Borovia. And if the party agrees, like, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds great, let's get out of this place sucks. Strahd will basically get the party to bring him out of Borovia, and he'll settle wherever that person originally lived or wherever that person was going, and he basically takes on a new life. And for the requirement for vampires to rest in dirt of their own home, it's explained that the gypsies will actually take care of that for him. Yeah, it's a shame that they got rid of that, where you actually rolled for Strahd's particular goals, because at the beginning of the modern module it tells you overarchingly like what Strahd's goals are, and he has quite a bit of them. You know, he wants to capture and kill Van Richten. You know, he wants to obtain Irina. He has all kinds of goals, but this made it more interesting because he has a specific goal, and so you know if you wanted to, you could roll for his specific goal for that campaign, and I just thought that was cool. But you know, after their fortune reading and slinking about Borovia a bit and exploring and trying to protect Irina, when all that's said and done, the module basically will devolve into a vampire hunt in the castle. That's almost what happens 99% of the time. So, the original module is the castle, the village, and the gypsy camp. That's it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the inhabitants specifically of Borovia and how they changed throughout the years in the lore, and get into the Vistani and stuff like that before we really tackle wider Borovia as it exists today. But that will have to wait until next time, because as I say that, I realize this video has gone on entirely too long, and I am very prone to rambling. So until next time, I am your DM Eternal.